She was a brilliant surgeon who swore she'd never need anyone. He was a ruthless CEO who believed love was weakness. But one unforgettable night changed everything. When Alina Hayes discovers she's pregnant with Damien Roth's child, secrets unravel, pride shatters, and two enemies are forced to confront a truth neither of them expected. Love doesn't follow rules. From hate to heartbreak, from denial to devotion, this story will leave you breathless. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable love stories. The first snowfall of the year coated Chicago's streets in a layer of glistening white, but inside Orem Heights Medical Center, the atmosphere was anything but serene. Fluorescent lights buzzed above the long corridor as Dr. Alina Hayes moved with her usual purposeful stride, the heels of her boots echoing sharply against the marble floor. She clutched a thick binder of surgical reports to her chest, her jaw set in its habitual firmness. At 31, Alina was one of the most respected cardiothoracic surgeons in the state. Brilliant, relentless, and impeccably controlled. She had built her reputation not just on her hands, but on her discipline, on the sacrifices she made, and on the stone wall she had carefully constructed around her emotions. That morning's board meeting was already in session when she stepped inside the mahogany-paneled conference room. Her eyes instantly found him. Damien Roth, the 33-year-old CEO of the Orem Medical Network. He was leaning back in his leather chair, fingertips steepled beneath his chin, a faint smirk curling the corner of his lips as if he'd been expecting her entrance with some private amusement. He looked just as he always did. Tailored suit, crisp shirt, perfectly tousled dark hair, and a gaze that could slice through steel. "We're discussing budget reallocations," he said casually, as though she had interrupted a pleasant brunch. "Dr. Hayes, your department's expenses are 30% higher than last quarter." Alina took her seat, unbothered by the veiled jab. "That's because we performed 14 additional cardiac procedures, life-saving ones. Not all value can be measured in quarterly margins, Mr. Roth." His smile widened, cold and calculating. "Everything can be measured, especially in medicine." Their eyes locked. The tension, as always, was electric, volatile, like a match hovering above dry kindling. Around the table, other executives shifted uncomfortably, but neither Alina nor Damien broke the gaze. It had been this way since her very first day. From the moment they met, they had clashed. Ethics against efficiency, heart against numbers. After the meeting, she stormed down the hallway, her knuckles white around her binder. "Arrogant bastard," she muttered under her breath. That evening, Orem hosted its annual gala to celebrate the opening of a new surgical wing. Alina had tried to decline, but her department chair insisted. So there she was, in a dark emerald gown she barely had time to choose, surrounded by swirling champagne flutes and hollow laughter. The ballroom glittered with donors, surgeons, and business magnates. Alina stood stiffly near a window, swirling a glass of wine and counting the minutes until she could leave. Then came the voice she hoped she'd avoid all night. "You clean up well, Dr. Hayes." She turned slowly, finding Damien beside her, whiskey in hand, his tie loosened slightly, his eyes dancing with amusement. "Mr. Roth," she said coolly, "didn't realize you cared enough to notice." He tilted his glass toward her. "Oh, I notice more than you think." She narrowed her eyes, ready to fire back, but something in the way he looked at her, less smug, more curious, caught her off guard. "You're wasting your time trying to provoke me," she said. "Am I?" he murmured, stepping closer. "Or are you just afraid I'll succeed?" His nearness sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. She hated that her body betrayed her like this, hated even more that he noticed. "You don't scare me," she said, her voice tight. "No," he said softly, "but I intrigue you." Alina's breath hitched. The air between them grew heavy, charged. For a second, the entire room faded. The music, the chatter, the clinking of glasses. All she could see was him, and those amber eyes that stared at her like they were trying to unravel every secret she thought she'd hidden. She moved to leave, but he caught her wrist gently. "One drink," he said. "Then you can pretend I don't exist again." Against every ounce of her better judgment, she stayed. One drink turned into two. The conversation was tense, quick-witted, sparring, but there was laughter too, a crack in the wall. By the end of the night, they were alone on the balcony. Snow fell in soft spirals around them, and when he leaned in, she didn't pull away. Their kiss wasn't gentle. It was a collision, hot, angry, desperate. That night, Alina Hayes made a mistake, and she knew she wouldn't be able to forget it. The morning after had come with merciless clarity. Alina Hayes stood barefoot in her apartment, her emerald gown crumpled on the floor like a broken promise. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, still tracing her lips as if she could wipe away what had happened the night before. Her body ached in unfamiliar ways, but it was her mind that wouldn't quiet. The image of Damien Roth, his mouth on hers, his hands on her back, the way her name had sounded when he said it without sarcasm, replayed with brutal precision. She had made a mistake, a massive, emotional miscalculation, and she would never let it happen again. She buried herself in work, scheduling double shifts and avoiding social functions. Whenever she passed Damien in the corridors of Orem Heights, she averted her gaze with surgical precision. He, in turn, didn't press. He made no remarks, no smirks. If anything, he watched her more closely, like a man reading between the lines of a story that hadn't yet finished unfolding. Then came the nausea. At first, she chalked it up to stress. Long hours, poor eating, minimal sleep. But when it didn't fade, when her hands began to tremble during procedures and fatigue clung to her like fog, she knew. A test at home confirmed the suspicion she had refused to voice. 2 pink lines. Bold, unforgiving. She sat on the cold tile floor, the test clutched in her shaking fingers, her heart hammering against her ribs. No, this wasn't possible. She had been careful. Her life wasn't meant for this. There was no space in her world for vulnerability, for children, for a man like Damien Roth to be tethered to her in any way. But the truth didn't care about her plans. The child was real. Her first instinct was silence, to tell no one, to keep her life moving forward, uninterrupted. But that resolve unraveled the moment she stepped into the hospital cafeteria and saw Dr. Leo Kincaid. Leo had been her best friend since med school, her confidant, her steady constant. He had just returned from Johns Hopkins after completing a cardiology fellowship and was taking a position at Orem Heights. Seeing him brought a rare smile to her lips, the kind that reached her eyes. He noticed immediately that something was off. Over lunch, she tried to play it cool, but Leo had known her too long. By the time she reached for her water a little too quickly, his brow had furrowed. "Alina," he said gently, "what's going on?" She hesitated for the briefest moment. Then, in a breathless rush, she whispered, "I'm pregnant." He blinked, stunned, setting his fork down. "You, Alina, what? Who's the father?" The pause that followed was heavier than silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and hoarse. "It's Damien Roth." Leo leaned back slowly in his chair, processing. "The CEO?" She nodded, her eyes brimming with panic she had held at bay for days. "It was a mistake, Leo. Just one night. I don't want anything from him. He can't know." Leo didn't ask why. He just reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here." In the following weeks, Leo became her shadow. He drove her to appointments, brought her bland crackers during her morning nausea spells, and offered a protective wall of calm when the world felt too loud. It didn't take long for people at the hospital to start making assumptions, seeing them together, how closely he hovered near her. It was easier to let them believe it. Easier than admitting the truth. When Damien passed her in the hallway and his gaze flicked, for a moment, to her abdomen, then back to her eyes with the faintest flicker of something like recognition, her pulse spiked. She turned sharply into an exam room, locking the door behind her and sinking to the floor. Damien couldn't know. Not because he would be angry. No, because he would want to do the right thing. And Alina couldn't stomach the idea of being someone's obligation. She had spent her entire life proving she didn't need anyone. Needing him now, especially him, would unravel everything she had built. But secrets have a shelf life. And Alina could already feel the weight of hers pressing in from all sides. Tighter with every passing day. Rain lashed against the windows of Orem Heights Medical Center as Alina sat in the physician's lounge, staring blankly into her untouched cup of tea. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one unraveling inside her. Her lab coat hung open, her scrub top slightly wrinkled, uncharacteristic for someone as composed as she usually was. She hadn't slept in 2 nights. Her body ached. The fatigue, the dizziness, the nausea, It was getting harder to hide. And worse, she could feel the eyes on her, whispers trailing in her wake. Some suspected something. She was sure of it. The door creaked open behind her, but she didn't look. She didn't need to. She knew that scent, clean linen and subtle sandalwood, and the way the air seemed to still whenever he entered a room. "You've been different lately," came Damien's voice, low and unreadable. "Everything okay, Dr. Hayes?" Her back stiffened. "I'm fine," she replied too quickly, not turning around. He circled to face her, arms crossed loosely. "You sure? You've been missing morning meetings, you've rescheduled procedures, you're avoiding me like I'm the plague." "I've just been busy," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. But her voice lacked its usual steel. Damien narrowed his eyes, studying her like a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. "Busy? Or hiding?" Her pulse quickened. "That's none of your business." His lips twitched slightly, not quite a smile. "You made it my business the night you showed up at my door." She stood suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the tile. "That night was a mistake. That's all." Before he could respond, the door burst open. "Alina?" Leo's voice cut through the tension as he entered the lounge, eyes flashing with concern. "Dr. Hayes, you're needed in OR2. Emergency thoracic trauma." She blinked, grateful for the interruption, nodding quickly. "On my way?" But as she rushed past both men, she caught the way Damien looked at Leo, the calculation, the suspicion. She didn't stop to explain. She couldn't. Her hands trembled as she pulled on gloves outside the operating room. The surgery demanded everything she had, every ounce of concentration and steadiness she could summon. But midway through, the room began to spin. Her knees buckled. She gripped the edge of the table, chest heaving. The voices of her colleagues blurred into a dull roar. She tried to speak, to hold on, but the lights dimmed, then vanished altogether. When she woke, she was lying in a hospital bed. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled her nose. A monitor beeped steadily at her side. The room was quiet, dim, and cool. Her body felt heavy, her mind groggy. Then she heard his voice. "About time," Damien murmured, standing at the edge of her bed, his arms crossed but his expression far from cold. In fact, he looked shaken. What happened?" she rasped. "You collapsed in the OR. They said you were dehydrated, exhausted, malnourished," he said. "Want to tell me why?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She glanced toward the door, half hoping Leo would appear. Instead, Damien stepped closer. "You're pregnant," he said softly. Not a question. Alina's breath caught. "I saw your chart," he admitted. "It was routed through admin when you passed out. I didn't want to believe it, but it all makes sense now." She turned away. "It's none of your concern. Don't give me that," he snapped, but his voice quickly softened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her hands twisted the blanket. "Because I didn't want to be your responsibility." He looked as if she had slapped him. "Is that really what you think of me?" "I don't know what to think of you," she whispered. "You walk through life untouched, controlled, calculating. I didn't think you'd want this. Not with someone like me." Damien stared at her for a long moment. "So you lied." She looked up, her eyes glassy. "I told Leo. I let people think it was his. He offered to help." A muscle in Damien's jaw tightened. "And is that what you want? Him?" "I want what's best for this baby," she said, her voice cracking. "And that might not be you." He stepped back, hurt flickering across his features before the familiar mask slid into place. "Good to know," he said flatly. But as he turned to leave, she whispered almost inaudibly, "I never stopped thinking about you." Damien paused, hand on the door, shoulders tense. He didn't reply. But for the first time since Paris, she let herself cry. Not from fear, not from shame, but because she knew the web of lies was unraveling, and soon there would be no hiding at all. Leo stood outside Damien Roth's office, his jaw clenched and palms sweating, the weight of truth pressing against his chest like a stone. He had debated whether to say anything for days, but seeing Alina fall apart piece by piece had finally shattered his restraint. The secret was no longer hers alone to carry. It was damaging her. And if Damien was even half the man he pretended to be, he deserved to know. Inside, Damien was seated behind his sleek glass desk, sleeves rolled up and phone pressed to his ear. He looked up, mildly annoyed at the interruption, then saw Leo and raised a hand to silence the call. "What is it, Dr. Kincaid?" His tone was clipped, formal. Leo inhaled slowly, gathering his composure. "We need to talk. It's about Alina." Damien's expression didn't change, but his shoulders tensed slightly. Go on. She's been lying to you, Leo said without preamble. The baby, it's not mine, it's yours. Silence. For a full 5 seconds, Damien didn't blink. Then slowly, he leaned back in his chair, processing. She told me it was yours, Leo continued. But she was scared. Scared you'd treat it like a transaction, like a merger you didn't ask for. Damien's mouth parted slightly, but he said nothing. The quiet between them was brittle, on the verge of shattering. She didn't lie because she wanted to hurt you, Leo added gently. She lied because she didn't know if you were capable of love. Damien stood abruptly, the chair rolling back slightly. His eyes darkened with 1,000 unspoken things. Anger, disbelief, regret, and something deeper. Where is she? In the maternity ward. She collapsed again this morning, her blood pressure spiking. They're prepping for possible intervention. Damien didn't wait for another word. He was out the door in seconds, moving through the hospital corridors with the force of a storm. His shoes echoed sharply. Nurses stepped aside instinctively. Every beat of his heart screamed one name, Alina. He found her in room 304, lying pale and still beneath a soft white blanket. Machines beeped quietly beside her, and a nurse was adjusting her IV line. Damien's presence filled the room like a shadow, drawing the nurse's eyes before she quietly excused herself. Alina stirred weakly, eyelids fluttering open, and then she saw him. Her breath hitched. Damien? He didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked to the side of her bed, staring at her with a gaze so intense she couldn't look away. Why? His voice was hoarse. Why would you lie to me like that? She blinked, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. Because I was terrified. You've never needed anyone, Damien. I didn't want to be another obligation. I didn't want to be something you resented. He sat beside her, took her hand. It was colder than he expected. I never asked for this, he admitted, voice low. But the moment Leo told me, something in me cracked. I haven't stopped thinking about you since Paris. I've tried to push you out, but I can't. She turned her face away. It's not enough. He gently touched her chin, guiding her back to him. Then let me show you that it is, that I'm enough. For you. For this baby. I'm not the man I used to be. Not since you. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, and her lips trembled. I didn't know how to let you in. You don't have to know, he whispered. You just have to try. For the first time, she let herself lean into him. His arms came around her protectively, his forehead resting against hers. There was nothing polished in that moment, nothing cold or calculated. Just two people who had spent so long fighting what they both wanted. Later that night, Damien refused to leave her side. He sat by her bed as monitors softly blinked beside them, his hand never leaving hers. He had always believed control was power, but now he understood. This was real power. Choosing to stay, choosing to love, no matter how uncertain the outcome. Alina watched him through half-lidded eyes, exhaustion pressing down like fog. You really mean it, don't you? I do, he said, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. And I'm not going anywhere. The room grew quiet, but the silence was no longer frightening. It was comforting, like the space between heartbeats when everything finally makes sense. For the first time in years, Alina Hayes didn't feel alone. And Damien Roth, the man who had once ruled from a tower of logic and isolation, had come crashing down to meet her, right where she was, with no agenda but love. Spring arrived quietly in Chicago, and with it came a new rhythm to Alina Hayes' life. One that pulsed not to the beat of hospital monitors or surgical clocks, but to the tiny, unpredictable rhythm of her newborn daughter's breath. Sophie Roth had arrived 5 weeks early, small but fierce, her cry sharp and strong from the moment she entered the world. Alina still remembered the fear that had gripped her chest as the doctors wheeled her into surgery. She remembered Damien's voice in her ear, promising he wouldn't leave her side, and for once, someone hadn't. Damien had been there through it all. The blood, the sweat, the chaos. His perfectly tailored world had crumbled the moment he heard complication, and what rose from its ashes wasn't a businessman or a tycoon, but a father. The night Sophie was born, he held her like she was made of glass, his hands trembling, his breath uneven. He hadn't cried, at least not in front of anyone. But Alina had seen the redness in his eyes, the way he'd buried his face in the crook of her neck when the room emptied. Now, weeks later, Their once separate lives had knitted into something unexpected. They moved into a modest house just outside the city, a 2-story home with ivy on the porch and sunlight that poured through the nursery window every morning. Alina returned to part-time surgery. Damien transformed his role at Orem Heights, launching initiatives focused on patient care and physician wellness, ideas inspired directly by her. Their days were a careful dance of compromise. Damien, once allergic to disorder, now woke up at 3 a.m. to soothe the crying Sophie. Alina, once fiercely independent, now leaned into his presence without guilt. And their daughter? She brought out something raw and beautiful in both of them. A softness, a willingness to stumble forward together, one imperfect day at a time. One Saturday afternoon, Alina stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing an oversized sweater with Sophie nestled against her chest in a soft wrap. She was stirring a pot of soup when Damien entered from the back porch, carrying a basket of freshly picked herbs and a diaper bag slung over his shoulder. He looked tired, hair tousled, shirt half-buttoned, but there was a peacefulness to him now that hadn't been there before. "You've been outside for 20 minutes and come back with rosemary and a diaper bag?" she teased. Damien grinned and kissed her on the cheek. "She had an emergency blowout. I handled it like a pro." She raised an eyebrow, impressed. "I'm proud of you." He looked down at Sophie's tiny head resting against her chest. "I never thought I'd be here, Alina. Changing diapers, learning lullabies, feeling terrified every time she sneezes." "Neither did I," she admitted. "But now I can't imagine anything else." That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep and the dishes were done, Damien led Alina out to the porch. The stars were out, clear against the city's glow. He took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small black velvet box. Alina froze. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. "I used to think love was a weakness," he said softly. "But you, Alina, you showed me it's the only thing that makes any of this matter. I don't want power. I don't want control. I just want you. You and her. Every day. Forever." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, timeless. Like her. Tears welled in her eyes before she even realized they had started. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You're serious? I've never been more." She took the ring with shaky fingers and slid it on herself. Then, smiling through her tears, she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I don't need perfect," she murmured. "Just real. And you're finally real to me." He wrapped his arms around her, pressing his lips to her forehead. Months later, Sophie took her first steps on that same porch, toddling toward Damien as he knelt with arms open. Alina stood nearby, laughter spilling from her lips like music. The man she once hated had become the father of her child, the partner she never expected, and the home she didn't know she needed. And as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in gold and lavender, Alina Hayes finally understood. Sometimes love doesn't come gently. Sometimes it crashes into your life like a storm. And when it's over, everything blooms. Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. We build walls, make rules, and map out our futures thinking we're in control. But the heart has its own way of rewriting the script. Alina and Damien's story teaches us that love isn't about perfection or timing. It's about vulnerability. It's about choosing each other even when it's uncomfortable, messy, and uncertain. Alina feared love would weaken her, and Damien believed emotions made him less powerful. But in the end, they learned that real strength comes from showing up for one another, especially when it's hard. We often push people away out of fear of being hurt, of being a burden, or of losing ourselves. But what if the very thing we're afraid of is what we truly need? Alina and Damien's journey reminds us that healing can only begin when we let someone in. That family isn't just about blood. It's about commitment, growth, and unconditional care. So if you're holding on to pride, anger, or fear, maybe it's time to let go. Let love surprise you. Let life lead you somewhere unexpected. Because sometimes the biggest blessings come from the places we least expect. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss more powerful stories like this one. You are part of our storytelling family now, and your presence means everything to us.